Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we are embarking on a genuinely captivating journey all the way back to the 4th century. We're going to be looking at the life of a desert monk whose extreme physical discipline and honestly radical empathy led to some of the most timeless and profound wisdom imaginable. We'll be exploring the monastic life, some incredible saintly parables, and a truly stunning redemption story surrounding a man known as St. John the Short. Let's get right into it. I want to hook you right off the bat with this profound thought. My thoughts with my mind are in heaven, but my meditation is buried in the dust below every creature. Really stop and ponder that for a second. I mean, how does someone find such an intense, soaring spiritual focus while living in a literal barren wasteland? How do you keep your mind up in heaven when your everyday reality is just dust?
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Life in the Desert.
To really wrap our heads around St. John's mindset, we kind of have to establish the historical setting first. He was born around 339 AD to a pretty poor Christian family in Thebes. At just 18 years old, so around 357 AD, he and his brother completely left society behind. They literally packed up and moved into the desolate Scetis desert to begin a monastic life. And man, his path just accelerates from there. By 374 AD, he takes on this life of severe strictness, eventually being ordained a priest and becoming an abbot around 390 AD, before he departs in peace in 405 AD. He went from absolute poverty to becoming one of the most revered leaders in the entire desert. But, we need to be crystal clear about what his daily life actually looked like. Asceticism wasn't just some abstract philosophy, right? It was a grueling, everyday physical reality, a lifestyle of severe physical discipline. For St. John, this meant his clothing was literally made out of scratchy palm leaves. Just imagine that. And after his mentor died, he actually dug an underground room inside a cave where he would spend entire weeks just fasting and completely absorbed in ceaseless prayer. The absolute harshness and the total commitment required to just survive, let alone thrive in that environment, is honestly staggering. It's a beautiful paradox, really. By completely stripping away all the comforts of the material world, fashion, fancy food, comfortable shelter, his spiritual influence actually expanded. The less he had, the more other monks flocked to him to learn from his wisdom. Moving on to Section 2, the Tree of Obedience. Now, this next story, it sounds exactly like a metaphorical parable, but it was actually a grueling physical reality. Just imagine being handed a piece of dead, dry wood by your elder, in this case, Abba John, and being told to go plant it and water it. Keep in mind, this wasn't just turning on a garden hose in the backyard. To water this dead stick, St. John had to walk 12 miles. 12 miles just to find water. And he was instructed to water it twice a day for 3 entire grueling years. Just think about the seemingly impossible, totally repetitive physical toll that demanded. It was the absolute ultimate test of patience and, most importantly, radical obedience. And this brilliantly illustrates the reward of that intense discipline. Because the shocking result is that after 3 years of this literal backbreaking labor, that dry piece of wood actually sprouted. It grew into a living, fruitful tree. Abba John actually took the fruit from this tree and shared it among all the elder monks, telling them to eat from the fruit of obedience. It's just a spectacular testament to faith and persistence. And incredibly, the historical sources note that the tree still exists in its place in his monastery today. No way, right? Now for Section 3, a radical redemption story. Okay, let's shift the tone here from a story of ascetic obedience to a much darker, much more emotional human story. This is the deeply tragic story of St. Paesa. When her parents died, she incredibly generously turned her home into a shelter for the poor and the traveler. She gave away absolutely everything she had until her funds completely ran dry. But in her extreme vulnerability, she ended up surrounded by people with ill intentions. And tragically, she turned her home into a house of prostitution. When the elders of the desert heard about this, they were just heartbroken. Remembering all the amazing good she had done for them in the past, they sent St. John to intervene as an act of pure mercy. And here is where it gets amazing. When St. John arrived, he didn't scream at her, he didn't condemn her or preach at her. He simply sat down, bent his head, and began to cry. When Paesa asked him why on earth he was crying, he gave this haunting response. He said, "Because I see the devil's plain on their face, and therefore I weep for you." Wow, this is so powerful. It perfectly emphasizes his profound, non-judgmental empathy. He immediately recognized the brutal spiritual battle she was losing, and his very first instinct wasn't anger. It was just deep, profound human sorrow. And this genuine weeping, it absolutely melted her heart. She literally trembles and asks him, "Is there any repentance for me?" And St. John, offering this immediate path out of the darkness, simply replies, "Yes, but not in this place." Notice how there's no bureaucratic delay here, no extensive list of penances to complete first. He immediately stands up and leads her right out of that toxic environment, heading toward a nearby convent.
Which builds to a truly stunning midnight resolution. So while they were journeying to the convent, darkness fell, and they slept apart in the wilderness. When St. John stood up for his midnight prayer, he saw this glowing pillar of light stretching all the way from heaven to earth. He saw angels carrying the soul of Paesa. He rushed over to her, only to find she had suddenly and unexpectedly died in her sleep. After praying fervently about her fate, he heard a voice declaring that her repentance was accepted the very moment she turned her heart around. It is just a breathtaking story of instant grace. Finally, let's look at Section 4, Wisdom for the Modern World.
So we've seen his extreme discipline and his radical empathy, but what does this mean for us? How do we actually apply this today? Well, if we break St. John's dense teachings down into practical, everyday habits, they look something like this. Wake up early to start your day with intention. Exercise great humility. Don't let your ego run the show. Pray often with pure speech. And this one is absolutely crucial. Do not compare yourself to others, and do not render evil for evil. This is a brilliant, completely grounded framework that absolutely anyone can use to build a strong foundation of inner peace. Notice the stark contrast in these two mindsets. On one side, we have the chaos of a material focus, right? Getting angry, constantly paying attention to everybody else's faults, feeding off drama. It's exhausting. But on the other side, we have St. John's version of spiritual asceticism, embracing humility, practicing restraint, and simply doing your work in peace. Recognizing the timeless value of this mindset is vital for us. It's quite literally the difference between a life of constant agitation and a life of genuine clarity.
So what does this all mean for you and me? That brings us to our final thought. Look, we don't all live in the Scetis desert. We live in a modern world of constant notifications, endless news cycles, and relentless noise. St. John found his clarity by physically removing himself to a harsh wasteland, deliberately stripping away everything that just didn't matter. So I want to leave you with this question to carry with you today. In our noisy modern lives, where is your desert of peace? Where do you go to strip away the distractions and find your true focus? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I challenge you to carve out that quiet space for yourself today. Catch you next time.